Hello, welcome to everyone. I'm Giorgia Giovannetti. I'm the Vice President for International Relations at the University of Florence in Italy. I will be introducing and chairing the debate, well-being from an academic perspective. Back in October 2019, the Council of Europe outlined a series of recommendations for the European Commission and for the member states, acknowledging that well-being is a principal aim of the European Union. But the recommendations were also underlining that well-being includes people, societies, and the planet, and were promoting a horizontal approach based on cross-sectoral collaboration. Then, October 2019, we were just starting our project, and we thought that focusing on well-being was a real challenge that we wanted to tackle, was the challenge that we wanted to tackle. Indeed, the euniwell core mission is to understand, measure, rebalance, and improve the well-being of individuals, community, and the society as a whole. In order to focus our expertise on the delivery of this core mission, we have developed 4 thematic arenas. The first one is an arena on well-being and health. We then had individual and social well-being as a second arena, environmental urbanity and well-being as a third arena, and teacher education as the fourth arena. Our rectors have highlighted that the research arena are closely linked with several sustainable development goals, namely, and this was also in the video this morning, good health and well-being, i.e. goal 3, peace, justice, and strong institution, which is goal 16, sustainable cities and communities, which is goal 11, quality education, which is goal 4, gender equality, which is goal 5, and reduced inequalities, which is goal 10. Of course, all these goals are also interacting one to the other. Our teaching and research of the 7 universities are already focused on these goals, but we need to strengthen our collaboration along these lines and better integrate the sustainable development goals into our arenas. We have therefore invited a panel of academic colleagues whose research interest interacts with our 4 research arenas. We will hear about the research. We will gain an insight into current thinking on well-being in these areas. This will help us possibly and hopefully to enhance collaborative research amongst all the members of the 7 universities which are part of Uniwell. Before introducing our panelists, which I will introduce in order of intervention, let me say to the public, as I saw that Anna already put in the chat, that you can use the question and answer facility to ask any question, but you can also, if you want, use the chat. And you can specify if you want to address a specific question to a specific speaker, or if the question is a general question that the speakers or myself can answer. It's now my great pleasure to introduce our panelists. The first panelist will be Professor Bea Pászthy, which is a professor at Semmelweis University, and she's the expert of Arena 1, Health and Well-being. Bea is Associate Professor of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, Psychosomatics and Psychotherapy. Bea founded the first Child and Adolescent Eating Disorder Center in Hungary in 2004. She's the chair of the Board of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and president of the National Qualification Board of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. So she's really very much into the topic, and we hope that she will help our well-being and our adolescent and children well-being. Our second panelist is Dr. Daniel Whitley of University of Birmingham, and his topics are more related to the second arena, which is individual and social well-being. Daniel is a reader in the Department of Management and is also the director of undergraduate program in Birmingham Business School. He is the editor of the Handbook of Research Methods on the Quality of Working Lives, which is published by Edward Elgar. His research focuses on workplace well-being, including the quality of work, work-life balance, and flexible working arrangement. Nothing better than this in this period of COVID to help us with our spending time at home and working from home. Third speaker will be Professor Ghozlane Fleury, University of Nantes. She's our expert in Arena 3, which, as I mentioned, is environment, urbanity, and well-being. Ghozlane is a professor of social and environmental psychology. She's the director of the Pays de la Loire Psychology Lab. Ghozlane research focuses on environment and health and the psychosocial process involved in the relationship with the environment, such as the assessment of place, environmental quality of life, social identity, but also residential discrimination. All these themes are really at the core of the research that we are going to undertake for the project. Finally, last but not least, we have Dr. Daniel Alvengar of University of Linnéuniversitetet. He is the expert in our fourth arena, which is teacher education. Daniel is the Dean of the Board of Teacher Education, is a teacher and researcher in education himself. Of course, is the associate editor of the Curriculum Journal, which is run by the British Educational Research Association, of which he's also a member. And he's also a member of the General Council Committee for European Association of Curriculum Studies. His research focuses on education policy and curriculum making as a social practice, the knowledge base and organization of teacher education, and leadership theory in school development. If you have listened to this morning panel, you have heard that these topics are really important, and that what we are going to do is we are going to develop some curricula along the line on which Daniel is working. So it will be very important to collaborate with Daniel to construct and build and slightly change our curricula, which already exist on all these topics, but now they have to become interconnected between the 7 universities. Without any further delay, let me open the workshop on academic perspective on well-being and ask each panelist to give a short presentation of the research area in relation to well-being. So each of them will give a 5 minutes, let's say, presentation, and then I will ask few questions to each of you in the same order, and then I will pose the question which I receive from the public. So I think now I can give the floor to Bea, which is going to be the first one. Please, Bea, the floor is yours. And you should unmute yourself.
Can you see my slides?
Yeah, we can see your slides, but we could not hear you. So
you can't hear me.
Now we can.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. So very welcome from Budapest, and very welcome from the 250-year-old Semmelweis University. The problem is that so this is Budapest, my magnificent capital, and this is Semmelweis University, which is 250 years old. And it's the oldest medical school in Hungary, specializing in health sciences. Besides our 250 years university celebration, I, as a pediatrician and child and adolescent psychiatrist, would like to draw your attention to another birthday we are celebrating. Today, on the World Prematurity Day, we stop and take a moment to show our compassion and support for families with premature babies. Children who were delivered extremely early are about 5-6 times as likely as those born in term to have neurodevelopmental disorders such as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, lower IQ, learning disabilities, and more trouble with anxiety and social problems that affect their schooling or being part of their peer group and being socially integrated. Sadly, prematurity is the leading cause of death in children under 5. This is our biggest research arena, working with children, preemies, going after their psychiatric disorders. Making actions to reduce the percentage of premature birth in our countries, in the euniwell countries, would be a great goal, I think. And as a future mothers and fathers are in here in our universities, I think we can step forward promoting healthy pregnancy and parenting. Why is mental health important? Children and adolescents with good mental health are able to achieve and maintaining optimal psychological, social functioning and well-being. And they have sense of identity and self-worth, sound family and peer relationship, and ability to be productive and learn, and capacity to tackle developmental challenge and use cultural resource to maximize growth. Moreover, the good mental health of children and adolescents is crucial for their active, creative, social and economic participation. But the sad truth is that mental illness is increasingly being recognized as the most significant health concern for children and adolescents in developed countries, which with an estimated prevalence of 20–25% of children and adolescents population in European countries. 3/4 of adult mental disorders have an onset before the age of 25 years, and up to 50% before the age of 4. The problem is that there's huge impact of mental health conditions. For example, 35% of students with mental health conditions aged 14 drop out of school, and 70% of youth in state and local juvenile justice systems have mental illnesses. Sad news is that second or third leading cause of death in youth in our euniwell countries is suicide. 90% of those who died in suicide had an underlying mental illness. So another goal would be in our euniwell community could strengthening child and adolescent mental health service, and as well as promoting mental health prevention programs, because the best prevention of adult mental disorders would be an efficient childhood and adolescent mental health care. Prevalence rates of psychiatric disorders have been found to range from 10 to 30% among children visiting primary care facilities in euniwell countries. Only 10 or 20% of these cases were recognized by primary health workers, which implies that the vast majority of children did not receive appropriate services. It should be borne in mind that in addition to those who have a diagnosable mental disorder, many more have problems that can be considered sub-threshold disorders in the sense that they do not meet full diagnostic criteria. Early intervention can reduce the severity of persistence of these disorders and lead to more favorable outcomes. Initiation of treatment, sadly, often delayed until 8–10 years after onset, resulting in potentially avoidable disease burden. So here comes my third goal for collaboration. euniwell organized awareness campaigns for understanding the early signs of mental health problems in childhood and adolescence would be a great goal in the forthcoming 3 years. The burden associated with mental disorders in children and adolescents is considerable, and it is made worse by stigma and discrimination. In many situations, mental disorders are poorly understood, and affected children are mistakenly viewed as not trying hard enough or troublemakers. Additionally, in contrast to physical illness, where parents may receive community support, stigma often results in parents being blamed for the mental health problems in their children. Behaviors associated with mental disorders are often misunderstood or are considered to be intentional or willful. For example, a depressed child who is acting badly may be punished for being naughty or impulsive. Social exclusion, punitive actions at school, criticism may result in lowered self-esteem and more mental problems as a result of a vicious circle. So it would be nice to, as a fourth goal, to organizing and initiating anti-stigma campaigns in our countries. At the end of my presentation, I would like to draw your attention to the health behavior in school-age children survey, which gathers data from almost 230,000 school-age children from 11th to 15th grade years from 45 countries on their physical health, social relationship, and mental well-being. It has tracked the experience of young people for over 35 years, and it is an essential tool in identifying progress across a wide number of health and social indicators. We are also involved in this survey as well. The newest report from the International Health Behavior in School-Aged Children study published in mid-May 2020 and shows that adolescent mental well-being declined in many countries between 2014 and 18. The report came out, says that besides this, mental well-being declines as children growing older. Girls are particularly at risk of having poor mental well-being outcomes compared to boys. And 1 in 4 adolescents report feeling nervous, feeling irritable, and having difficulties getting to sleep more than once per week. In around a third of our countries, the report revealed a rise in adolescents feeling pressed by schoolwork and a decline in young people reporting to like school. I would be very delighted to hear Daniel's input in this. The study also examines the growing use of digital technology, which amplifies vulnerabilities and introduce new threats such as cyberbullying, which disproportionately affect girls. Over 1 in 10 adolescents reporting having been cyberbullied at least once in the past 2 months. Violent behaviors continue to be an important public health concern, especially among boys. Physical activity levels remain extremely low and still decreasing, and overweight and obesity affect 1 in 5 adolescents. Hans-Henrik Kluge, the regional director for Europe, says that increasing numbers of boys and girls in the European region are reporting poor mental health, feeling low, nervous, or irritable is a concern for all of us. And yes, that's true. It's even worse in the COVID, and I hope that in the panel we can discuss as well. School went online, even universities went online, and how we respond to this growing mental health problem will echo for generations. Investing in young people by, for example, ensuring they have easy access to mental health services, or they have great schools or good social support, will buy a triple dividend, bringing health, social and economic gains to today's adolescents, tomorrow's adults, and future's generation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bea. This was a very, very important and worrying topic to a certain extent. This topic was already mentioned in the morning, in the panel in the morning, and certainly is a topic we should deal with to increase the well-being. I think 2 issues will be discussed also later. One is your proposal to have an awareness campaign, and also to the proposal to have an anti-stigma campaign, which I think is particularly important. So let me now give the word to Daniel Whitley, who is going to present his own arena. Please, Daniel, the word is yours.
Thank you, Giorgia. Yeah, so it's great to be invited to speak today at the euniwell launch. I'm speaking around the topic of individual and social well-being. So I wanted to structure my brief presentation around the central mission of euniwell, which is to understand, measure, rebalance, and improve well-being. So I wanted to start off by thinking about our understanding of individual well-being. Well, when we start thinking about well-being, and when we start getting academics involved in discussions of many topics, of course, we have no single agreed definition. What we do know is that it's linked to happiness and quality of life. It incorporates physical well-being associated with the condition of our body and factors which influence it. And it also includes psychological well-being, which is concerned with our mental health and happiness. The fact that we have no agreed definition is evidence of an ongoing discussion around our understanding of well-being, and in itself is part of the reason for euniwell. But it also presents some challenges to us. Without a single direction, without a single agreement over what we're doing, it can be more challenging in order to identify goals and directions for activity. This has an ongoing impact when we start thinking about the measurement of well-being as well. Measurement loosely falls into two broad categories: objective measurement, which can take the form, for example, of things like measuring well-being against key milestones that are achieved throughout our lives, such as completing education or getting a first job or getting a promotion or something of that nature. Against subjective measures of well-being, which perhaps people are a little bit more familiar with, which are self-reported measures of well-being focused on how we feel about different aspects of our life, or indeed about our life overall. The ongoing discussion around how we measure well-being, how we reflect on well-being, obviously is an element of what eUniWell is setting out to explore and direct their activity toward in terms of achieving perhaps a more common agreement. Well-being is an interesting subject, I think, to research, and an interesting subject to be involved in, because it's something that everyone feels, everyone from academics to students to practitioners feel they have a very good understanding of at a base level. But at the same time, when you delve into the deeper aspects of the subject, it gets very complicated and heavily debated. I think in terms of thinking about how we rebalance and improve well-being, that's something that where I feel that eUniWell has a particular potential to achieve some real change and positive action. I think it's important that eUniWell puts well-being at the centre of society, and we do that by, eUniWell by its nature, we're drawing together expertise, we're drawing together a body of individuals from different disciplines, across different institutions and across different nations, and we can bring together all of our diverse understanding and methods of dealing with well-being, and bring that together to help in terms of identifying a common way and a most successful way forward. Putting well-being at the centre is most important, because by its nature, well-being is often considered in more of a reactive form. It's quite common, for example, in the research I do, which focuses on workplaces, it's quite common for well-being to be dealt with through external providers of mental health support, through a well-being provision for students, almost assuming a starting position of problem, of well-being representing a problem. And I think we need to reflect on that and rebalance that and rethink our approaches to well-being, and identify a way forward which is much more proactive and positive in its understanding and methods of approaching well-being. This is not to say that all of those things aren't important. Mental health provision is centrally important to organisations, institutions alike, but it's also important to make sure that provision aims to enhance and provide an environment which nurtures and is positive for well-being, rather than just being reactive. I think it's also finally important that we acknowledge the diversity of needs that are present. That's from the differences between staff and students, differences in other demographics, differences between institutions, differences between countries. One size fits all rarely works, and while we need to identify common ways forward and common approaches, we need to also incorporate into our thinking the diversity of needs. So I think I'll draw to a close of my brief presentation, if I may, and I'll hand back to Giorgia.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I'm happy that you raised the issue of measurement, which has been one of the discussions we have had when we wrote the project. But I'm particularly happy to see that not only you reflected on how your research is linked to well-being, which obviously is, but also you already made a step further and you say how to link your own research with the eUniWell. And also this morning we discussed at length the diversities of needs. That's one of the core mission. We have to design personal curriculum. That's exactly what we want to go to. So let me now pass to Ghozlane, the floor to Ghozlane. Please, Ghozlane, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Giorgia. Good afternoon, everyone from Nantes. So as a social and environmental psychologist, I will present my research arena. My research focuses on the interactions between the environment, society, and health. And these issues are intimately connected, and psychology, especially social and environmental psychology, can help to understand these connections. When talking about the environment, for each of us, it can concern different places and different spatial scales. It could be one's home, it could be the neighborhood, the place where we work, the place where we study, natural landscape, the city as a whole, or the whole world. In the field of social and environmental psychology, we are interested in studying this relation between people and place to understand how living places could contribute to enhance or reduce well-being and quality of life. Indeed, some environmental threats could affect health and well-being. It's the case of daily exposure to high levels of noise, industrial pollution, hazardous waste, for example. It's also the case of exposure to natural hazards like earthquakes, floods, forest fires, hurricanes. But fortunately, the living environment could also contribute to enhance well-being and reduce stress. These are called restorative effects of the environment. Urban parks which favor physical exercise, natural landscape which could contribute to connection to nature, to reduction of stress, social links and social support in the neighborhood which could contribute to social well-being. Now let me present you the way we define well-being in the field of psychology. We usually identify different dimensions to well-being and quality of life. Physical well-being, which is related to health status, psychological and mental well-being, and a third dimension, which is the social dimension of well-being. These different dimensions, these different facets of well-being could be impacted positively or negatively by the different characteristics of the living environments. To illustrate my work, I would like to present some examples of a research project to which I'm contributing as a social psychologist. For example, I contribute to two European-funded projects in which University of Nantes is partner. These two projects focus on the use of nature-based solutions in cities. Nature-based solutions then can be characterized as the use of nature in tackling challenges such as climate change, food security, water resources in cities. So my contribution as a social and environmental psychologist here is to understand how these nature-based solutions could enhance quality of life and well-being in the cities by reducing the negative impacts of climate change. As a second example, I'm leading a research project which questions environmental health topics and precisely vector-borne diseases. In this project, we do the focus on an emergent risk related to the colonization of the French territory by a tiger mosquito, which is a potential vector of serious diseases like the dengue fever, chikungunya, Zika. And here, our main objective in this project is to gather information about the beliefs, the practices, the actions related to the exposition to this risk to prevent the risk and to improve quality of life of the populations. To conclude, I would like to say that interdisciplinarity is the key word of my work. facing with these environmental and the social challenges, in my opinion, working with other humanities and social sciences, but also with health sciences is important or even necessary. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ghozlane. It was very interesting to see the role of social network and the interdisciplinarity that you highlighted, and we are going to pick up on that on the questions. But let me pass now the word to Daniel for the education part. Please, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Giorgia, and hello to everyone. I'm very grateful for having been invited to this panel, and I would also like to say on behalf of my own academic well-being, the work group Teacher Education within euniwell, and you know who you are out there, serves an essential support to me, and we share a commitment to education and teacher education for well-being. When I was a child, my mother worked as a nurse at a psychiatric ward, taking care of people with various and often serious mental conditions. My father worked as a teacher, so there's really no surprise that I chose my current line of work. Both my parents were deeply committed to the well-being of individuals with their different life histories and backgrounds. Well, during some of the evenings, I found my father preparing for teaching the next day, and using a translation in Swinglish, my father would say that, "Oh, Daniel, I'm busy making curriculum or making school." And making curriculum, of course, meant planning lessons, preparing or assessing assignments. But this idea of making curriculum is at the heart of my research. I understand curriculum making as a social practice, that is, something that is done, made by practitioners and other actors as students working with each other. In brief, teachers and school leaders are more than simply passive conduits implementing or delivering somebody else's curriculum product. Instead, they are making the curriculum within their own contexts alongside a number of other social actors, including the students. In my research, I'm exploring how teachers and students in school make meaning and recontextualize different forms of knowledge and how they seek to achieve agency within their contextual settings. In an ongoing project, we are conducting classroom studies, analyzing how different classroom discourses affect students' access to knowledge that would empower them and enable critical and creative thinking. There are differences in the access to such knowledge, and a major question is what implications these differences have in terms of equality, social justice, and the future well-being of individuals. Let's see if I can, yeah. So the conceptualization of curriculum making as social practice has implications for how we look at the relationships between different actors and discourses on other layers and sites, the transnational, national, regional, and local arenas. Now, I will definitely not discuss the figure you see here on the screen in detail. It's from a forthcoming book of ours, Curriculum Making in Europe, where we explore this dynamic and very complex features of curriculum making and draw on empirical examples across different national contexts in Europe. But the figure, it wants to illustrate curriculum making as a very interactive, non-linear process that occurs and flows across various contexts and sites. It's a highly dynamic and transactional process of interpretation, mediation, negotiation, and translation, involving a double movement, you could say, of systems changing, while individuals and groups working within these systems, or indeed comprising them, change at the same time. So the policy of the European Union, acknowledging that well-being as a principal aim, is a policy flow that also will shape curriculum across different contexts. Creating a curriculum for well-being must occur through the engagement of actors in different contexts and sites, that is policymakers, policy advisors, school leaders, teachers, students, stakeholders, and teacher educations for that matter. And we who sit in this webinar, and of course all across Europe in the euniwell partnership, we have the ability to work across different contexts and sites, bringing perspectives and experiences from our local domains into the euniwell arena and back again, connecting teachers and students from our universities and from our schools in the local community. So to conclude, from my perspective, well-being, maybe not foremost, is about being, but making. It's all about making a curriculum for well-being that enables students to move beyond their experience, that encourage them to discover the world from what's inside of them and empower them for the future. A key element of a curriculum for well-being is the response to the diversity of the learners. This involves teachers getting to know the learners and the diversity, and most importantly, not translating this diversity into deficits and needs. Rather, the diversity of the learners should be seen as a resource for curriculum making. So making a curriculum for well-being requires engagement in big issues about what is education for whom is it, by whom is it made. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I think it's really crucial, this idea of having a curriculum, making a curriculum. And I think we are going to count on you, because one of the first deliverables that we have is to make a mock on well-being and data literacy. So I think we are going to use your skills immediately. Now we are about 4 minutes late. So basically what I'll do is I'll cut 1 minute, the time that you have to answer the question which I'm going to pose you. So you're going to have 4 minutes each. It's a challenge to answer the question which I'm going to pose. The first one, as I said before, is to Bea. And Bea, you already mentioned one of the most important factors that impact childhood and adolescent well-being in Europe, speaking about mental health. But my question is, do you think there are other key factors that impact on childhood and adolescent well-being in Europe? And what are likely to be the major challenges that we need to respond in the near future? Also, considering the consequences of the current pandemic, which you have already done for the mental health. So other factors that you think are important. 3.5 minutes. You are muted. You are muted. Unmute yourself. Bea, you should unmute yourself.
I will. Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to put some emphasis on COVID. We have to discuss this as the current issue concerning children and adolescent mental health. And according to UNICEF data, as of 3rd of April, I think, 2020, COVID-19 has led to at least 188 countries-wide school closures, and it was impacting more than 90% of the COVID student population. So it had led to short-term and as well as long-term psychosocial and mental health implications for children and adolescents. And it has been indicated that compared to adults, and that's our experience as well, this pandemic may continue to have increased long-term effects, consequences on child and adolescent population. The major challenges children and young adults are facing during COVID-19 pandemic is changing in their routines, breaking continuity of learning, breaking in continuity of healthcare, missed significant life event, lost security and safety. Schools closures, for example, meant that children had to stay at home with parents and caregivers who had juggled caretaking, learning supervision, potential telework, responsibilities and maintaining household, extreme tension in the families. So number of children running away have been increased all over Europe during these times. The lost security and safety means that mounting economic stresses, that means families and parents lost their jobs. There are economic insecurity and consistently linked to children's adverse development, academic achievement, health outcomes. Mounting these economic stressors, children has an extreme risk for exposure to violence online. Along with stay-at-home orders during COVID-19, some children may have been increasingly exposed to child abuse and neglect at home, intimate partner violence and sexual violence. So increased online activity supports children's learning, socialization and play, but also puts them at heightened risks, such as online sexual exploitation, cyberbullying, online risk-taking behaviors, exposure to potentially harmful content. But worst of all, during lockdown, when schools, when legal and preventive services do not functioning fully, children are not in a position to respond violence, abuse and harm if they themselves have abusive homes. The very last sentence, that there is a huge impact on children. COVID has a huge impact on children and adolescents with special needs. 1 in every 5 children within the age of group 2 and 8 years who have neurodevelopment, behavior and emotional difficulty. And these children with special needs, autism, attention deficit hyperactivity, cerebral palsy, learning disabilities, developmental delay, encounter challenges during the current pandemic and lockdown. So I think the last sentence, that the closure of special schools and daycare centers, these children lack access to resource and material, and lack access to resource, peer group interactions, and opportunities of learning and developing important social and behavior skills. So there are plenty of things to do during COVID, and we have to do and collaborate, because all our countries are heavily infected by this pandemic. Thank you very much for your question, Giorgia.
Thank you, Bea. This was a very interesting answer to the question. And I think you really open our mind to a lot of things that we have to do. Daniel, it's your turn. And the main issue is the following. We have about 1/3 of our life, which are usually spent at work. The quality of our working life has a significant impact on individual well-being, but also on the societal well-being. What factor do you think can be taken into account by the individuals and the organization to improve well-being at work, beside the fact that now we all work at home, beside that? Please.
Yes, so absolutely, yeah, thanks, Giorgia. So yeah, so beside the obvious direct influence of the pandemic, I think the broader picture is one of emphasizing the need for a holistic or comprehensive approach to well-being at work. So too often it's the case that, I mean, I'll start off with the organizational level. I'll mention the individual level later. It's too often the case at the organizational level that organizations or institutions opt for what they consider to be an easier approach of, you know, taking steps, reactive steps to almost tick boxes to show that they're engaging with requirements or doing things to support their staff. And what actually is required is a wholesale review of what they do and how they do it as an operation. Well-being at work, well-being influences all aspects of work, and all aspects of work influence well-being. It's an interconnected relationship, and to address it properly requires a holistic approach that does just that. You have to look at all the different aspects of work, from workload to career development opportunities, to the physical workspace, to relationships at work, to you know, even aspects of giving at work. At the individual level though as well, there is, you know, it's easy, I think, for us to all start saying organizations need to do this and organizations need to do that, but there is a responsibility on the individual as well. After all, we understand our own well-being, or I would hope we would, and we know what affects our well-being. And so at the individual level, we need to take responsibility for that and think about what we're doing and how we're working. So, you know, let's take the example of what we're doing. Today, I'm standing up doing this meeting. I find that it's useful to do that in some of the meetings I have throughout the week. I take a number of breaks from screens, because all we do, it seems now at the minute, is look at screens. So it's important we look after our own health and well-being. And we can do that. We can work smart. We can think about how we use our time to be most productive and most effective. So I think it's at two levels. The individual needs to act, and the organization also needs to think about how they approach well-being.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Now we go from the micro that Daniel said we stand when we speak, we take some time from the screen, to the macro aspect with Ghozlane, because basically the question I wanted to ask to her is, the change in the working patterns for thousands of Europeans due to COVID has accelerated the discussion about the benefits of the traditional urban-based workspace versus flexible arrangement. Many times this was done also with reference to environmental impact, to well-being. We see that people are going out, for instance, from New York, they leave the city to go abroad. So there are a lot of changes. And what role do you think our attitude towards the environment play in our quality of life? And what is the impact, or how does the focus on environment have an impact on our individual well-being?
Thank you, Giorgia, for this question. Yes, COVID and lockdown situations in European cities actually highlighted the impacts of the living environments and workplaces on well-being. This question is very interesting to address in a psychological point of view. Individual differences and the characteristics of the different contexts will play an important role at this level. In terms of contexts, of course, remote working is not experienced in the same way, depending on the more or less facilitating characteristics of the place. But flexibility can also be very well experienced with benefits that could be seen in terms of reduced travel, saved time, or reduced air pollution. Beyond the characteristics of the context, our relationship with the environment is strongly dependent on our attitudes, on individual characteristics like values, beliefs, attitudes that we have developed towards the environment. Indeed, we can be more or less sensitive to climatic and ecological issues. Ecological problems can directly impact the well-being of the populations by exposure to hazards, to environmental threats, but they can also have an indirect impact by the way in which we perceive them, give them a meaning, assess them in terms of vulnerability, severity, probability of occurrence, possible impact in the long term on the future generations, for example. And the way we perceive the situations and the risks could also generate awareness, anxiety, sometimes stress. So to face with the threatening situation, we usually adopt what we called in psychology coping strategies. These strategies could be emotional, like denial of risk or relativization of risk, but it can also be related to coping behaviors adopted to face with the risk and to try to reduce the causes of the risk of all its effects. Efficient coping strategies are protective for health and well-being. When our actions are in line with our attitudes, it's rather a generator of well-being. On the other hand, in social psychology, studies highlighted very clearly that attitudes are not necessarily associated with concordant behaviors, then generating cognitive dissonance. In fact, other psychological and psychosocial factors could play a role here by making it difficult to adopt a behavior and change our habits to more sustainable ones. We can, for example, consider ourselves as not efficient enough to modify our behavior on the long term. Social acceptability could also play a role here in this issue. And sometimes it's the reality of the context and the low level of control on the situation that slow down transition from attitude to behavior and not individual characteristics. In conclusion, our attitudes, values, beliefs towards the environment are key factors that contribute to explain the way we interact with our environment and the way the environment could contribute to our well-being. But we must not forget the more or less facilitating role of the context, be it social, economic, cultural, or political. Thank you for your attention.
Ghozlane. This was very interesting. Daniel, Bea and also Ghozlane have raised the issue of mental health of young people. Now, your expertise is teacher. How do you think, I mean, certainly we will all say that teachers play a very important role in supporting the mental health of young people. Now, how do you think the teaching practice can adapt to meet these needs? How do you see the teaching practice to change? What can we do? Help us.
A very good question. Not easy to have in some minutes, but I could have a go. It all starts with a good teacher, and I believe that the current situation has reminded us and proven to us the validity and justification of such a claim. I mean, the pandemic COVID-19 as well has been mentioned here, growing awareness of our ways of living are destroying the planet and changing the climate. It has shown our vulnerability, but at the same time, it has emphasized the importance of us as a humanity. So the main message from the world of education and from teachers should be that we are not helpless and everything is not hopeless. But the question about the different needs of young people and how teaching in our preschools, schools, universities, and education institutions could serve the purpose of well-being, well, my answer to that question is quite short. It depends. Well, my argument is that this question of teaching practices that are suitable should always be put in relation to what we seek to achieve. And I mean, the teaching profession it's usually described as a scripted profession, meaning that there is no manuscript, no manual to face all the various situations that could occur. And all classrooms differ between each other and over time due to contextual conditions, different structural relationships between teachers and students, groups of students, and individual relationships between students. Young people, as we have heard, have different needs. And we know that our classrooms are in this respect very much characterized by diversity. And sometimes these needs may collide or cause conflict. But talking about the pandemic, I mean, of course, we have already mentioned the transition to distance education. And it's true, of course, that the new technology, it opens up for great possibilities. But there is always this risk that we keep on running in the same old tracks, where it's only the medium for teaching that has changed, but not how we engage in teaching and the way we do it. But there are reports we know of that teachers say that the move to digital teaching, in a way, has helped them to get in touch with those students that we heard of from Bea, for instance, or from what Daniel said, the silent ones, the ones who are vulnerable and so on. So, of course, through this medium, we can see that students open up and share their thoughts with the teacher to a far greater extent, while others, of course, could report that perhaps others are silenced. But my main point is that the teacher, regardless, must possess a very rich repertoire of teaching practices, a kind of toolbox, if you want to say so, and an awareness on when, where, and why certain methods or schemes are appropriate and purposeful for achieving a certain aim. So if we want our young to develop specialized disciplinary, interdisciplinary, epistemic, and procedural knowledge that enables them to go beyond everyday experience, then we should engage them in teaching practices that helps them to understand how such knowledge could be used for critical and systematic exploration and the dynamic and very changing character of scientific knowledge. What is fact, what is fiction, and how may they as individuals reflect upon their learning and the ability to learn how to learn, that it's a lifelong process. And if we want them to develop both cognitive and these metacognitive, social and emotional, physical, practical skills, we should engage them in dialogical, inquiry-based and experiential activities where they learn how to collaborate and to interact, regardless of what the medium is. Learning is a social process where individuals create their meaning in relation to the outside world by relating their experiences as a basis for understanding the present, which also creates their expectations for the future. So a curious discovery and activities that promotes creativity and innovation. And to conclude, if we want our young people to develop personal, local, societal, and global attitudes and values, our practices should be about living those democratic values and enabling students to practice citizenship and to develop the capacity to question critically. Because it's very hard to prepare students for a future we really don't know how it will be, but I think we can learn and prepare them for what we want that future to become.
Thank you very much. This is a very nice vision. First of all, you claim the no one size fits all, which I think is absolutely at the basis of the euniwell. Then the diversities, you pointed out to the diversities of needs of different people in different age, in different environment. And then you said something which I think is very important for all of us, which is we have to change our way of teaching when we change the methodology of teaching. So we went to the online teaching is not like the same things. I cannot replicate my lecture, which was the lecture I will do to students under normal circumstances. When I see their faces, I see how they react, I can challenge them on question and things like that. And then you said something very, very important, which is learning is a social process. And we have to form people, educate people to react to creativity, to be creative. We don't know what's going to be the future. You said something which is visionary, which is we have to form them for our idea of future. I will say we have to form them to be able to tackle any challenge, because they have the skills to tackle challenge, even if it's not exactly our ideal future, which may be or not be, or we may have different ideas on that. I thank everyone, but I have some questions from the public. The first one, I think, is addressed mainly to Daniel, to you, because it says, to make these well-being curricula and getting to know one another requires to have small groups of students. How do you handle that when you work in a large university with large groups of students? So I don't know whether you want to take up that question, Daniel.
I think it's a very good question. I think we all grappled with that issue. But I would say that it's a very important part to equip the students with the different approaches and methods for working together and supporting one another in these groups, to show them how group work and collaborative work can be performed and done. So it's a very much of a part of integrating such ways of working, walking the talk as a teacher, so to say, as well, that they can become resources for one another. Because when we talk about diversity, of course, there's a power in diversity in that sense. So I would say that, a short answer to that as well, because probably other questions are on, but equip the students, prepare them for this, and help them and support them to work in these smaller groups and support each other. That's a just brief.
Thanks, Daniel. A more general question is, addressing inequalities is a transversal theme across our research arenas. What do you see as the most urgent equality challenge to address in relation to your own field? Maybe let's take a couple of fields. Who wants to take up this? What kind of equality challenges? Daniel, why don't you go on? Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in the very short term, one of the things that the move to remote working has done is it's had two effects. One, it's created a lot of challenges for people who have had to adapt to working outside of their normal workplace, perhaps working alongside other family members or children or whatever it might be in their households. But it's also presented an opportunity in terms of increasing accessibility to work for those who may not have been able to work in a traditional workplace. So one of the things we have to think about, I guess, in the near future is how we rethink work around creating access and maintaining access to those people who, if you like, have had their opportunities to work increased in this time, while also enabling those who perhaps found the last few months to be a little less than easy to move back to what they would prefer in terms of working patterns. So how do you handle that diversity of needs in terms of working patterns? That's something that I think is particularly prominent as an upcoming challenge we face with well-being.
Thanks, Daniel. One sentence from Bea and one from Ghozlane to end up this panel on this same question, I will say.
I would rather say social deprivation would be a great inequality factor. For example, they cannot access, for lower economic classes, cannot access for good schools, good health, good mental health facilities, and even the obese and overweight children. I just quoted in my previous lecture, 60% of them coming from lower socioeconomic classes. So social deprivation and poverty would be my choice.
Ghozlane.
In my opinion, the most urgent equality challenge related to the environment is the question of environmental justice. because the impacts of the environmental threats are not equally distributed in the living areas. The presence of negative environmental characteristics such as industrial pollution, hazardous waste or noise, and the absence of positive environmental characteristics, parks, trees, open spaces, are detrimental to human health and well-being. So in my point of view, it's important to address this issue of differential proximity and exposure to environmental threats.
Thank you very much. Daniel, you didn't have a chance to answer this question. If you want to give one word, please.
So I would say that access to equal knowledge, equality in education, but I would say that everyone was working here together. We should find the solutions together on these different issues.
Of course, we will find a solution together. We'll all work together to deliver a great European universities and to go on. And we are committed to actually have a European university. So that will be our task for the next year. I know 3 years is a very short time to have a European university, but we will get there. We'll start moving, organizing curricula, doing a lot of things together, research and teaching together. And I think eventually we'll stay together much, much longer than the project has envisaged with the 3 years financing, possibly 5. So I think this is just a start. Today is the first day in which we are working together. We are knowing each other, meeting. So I really want to thank all of you for this very interesting panel. And I want to thank all the participants. I was checking the number. We had 107 participants, which I think for a panel is quite a lot. There are a lot of people interested in euniwell. And I think we will have a lot of people which will be willing to contribute and collaborate with us. And thanks. It was really, really good to listen to all of you. Thank you very much for participating. And we'll be in touch and we'll do things together. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.